Worst freak accidents, part 16. This is the case of Margaret Maurer. Margaret was 21 years old and a senior and biology major at Tulane University. On March 5th, Margaret, along with a couple of her friends, were on a road trip from New Orleans to Georgia, and they stopped at a restaurant in Mississippi off of Interstate 10. At the same time Margaret and her friends are walking back from the rest stop, two wheels come off of an 18-wheeler, roll across the eastbound lanes, and enter near the rest stop and strike Margaret. The drivers told police that he realized he lost the wheels and didn't know how it happened, so he turned around and then saw first responders. Margaret lost her life, and her two friends were so in shock that they were transported to a nearby hospital. The dual wheels were estimated to weigh around 1,000 pounds, and two men couldn't even push them up the ramp of the wrecker. A cable had to be used. Worst freak accidents, part 17. This is the case of Julia Sharkham. Julia was 21 years old and a mom of two. She was from Belarus. On August 31st, she was celebrating her 21st birthday with some friends and family. Sometime in the early afternoon, Julia went to pull her 2-year-old daughter from the car through the half-open window. As she was doing this, her daughter accidentally hit the switch, which caused the window to roll up and clamp onto Julia's throat, which cut off her air supply. A couple hours later, her husband would find her lifeless body still stuck in the window. He would soon break the window and rush her to the hospital. She suffered asphyxia, which caused brain damage, and she would soon pass 8 days later. Worst freak accidents, part 18. This is the case of Puneet Kaur. In 2018, 28-year-old Puneet Kaur, her husband, 2-year-old son, and grandmother decided to go go-karting at Aqua Village Amusement Park near Pinjore Gardens. Before the ride, Puneet puts a helmet on and then runs her hair up into the helmet and down through her jacket. Puneet and her husband were completing their first lap when her hair got entangled in the wheel and caused her scalp to be ripped off. She was still conscious after her husband stopped driving and was asking what is happening to her, and she was rushed to the hospital but was unable to be saved. I couldn't find any follow-up on lawsuits or settlements after this incident. Worst freak accidents, part 18. This is the case of Diane Durr, who was struck by a Taco Bell sign. On April 3rd of 2009, 49-year-old Diane and her husband drove to North Platte from Chambers to meet a Wyoming couple to sell them a Yorkie puppy. This day was very windy in this area and wind speeds got up to 45. So as Diane and her husband are waiting for the couple to show up for the puppy, the Taco Bell sign topples over and crushes their truck. Emergency personnel were quickly on the scene trying to free Diane and her husband from this truck. Diane was pronounced unalive at the scene and her husband was taken to the hospital with minor injuries. The puppies were unharmed and the other couple did show up, but I'm not sure if they ever got a puppy. Worst freak accidents, part 19. The time someone smuggled a crocodile onto an airplane. The day was August 25th of 2010. 21 people total were on board of this L-410 passenger aircraft. This airplane was approaching the Bandundu airport in the Congo. Unfortunately, one person would have the bright idea to smuggle a living croc in their large duffel bag. This croc would escape from the bag and cause panic. The crew would rush to the front of the plane to try and alert the pilot, and everyone else would follow. This would shift the plane's center of gravity, causing it to go awry and crash. Out of all 21 passengers, only one would survive, and he would tell the story of what happened. The croc itself ended up surviving, but authorities arrived and took the machete to it. Worst freak accidents, part 20. This is the story of Aurora Scheffel. Aurora was 14 years old. She was a cheerleader and she was from Eugene. On March 25th of 2017, Aurora was enjoying a day at the beach at South Jetty with her best friend and her best friend's mom. They would spend the day just hanging out, taking pictures, and all that stuff. At some point in the day, Aurora was standing on a large log that had washed ashore about 30 yards from the ocean's edge. Aurora would hop off of this log and a sneaker wave would come rushing in, knocking her down and rolling this large log over top of her. Before anyone could lift this log up off of Aurora, the water recedes and the log rolls back over top of her. Along with the help of others, they would finally lift this log up off of her, but it would be too late. Worst freak accidents, part 21. This is the story of Kyle Plush. Kyle Plush was a 16-year-old boy who enjoyed playing tennis. And on April 10th of 2018, he would drive to Seven Hills School to practice tennis. He would park and then climb over the first 2 rows of seating, making his way to the 3rd row. And when he went to reach over to grab his equipment, the seat would collapse and trap him. As you can see, the seat would be pressed against his chest, leaving his head pressed against the floorboard and his feet kind of sticking up in the window. At 3:14, he would call 911 screaming he needs help and he's trapped at Seven Hills somewhere, as the next part was inaudible to the 911 operator. The call would get disconnected, 911 would call back, but no answer. Officers arrive at 3:26, search the area, can't find him, close out the search at 3:37. Kyle would call again at 3:35 while officers were there, but the info wouldn't be transmitted. Hours later, his dad would go and find his body in the car, passed from asphyxia. A personal trainer would OD on caffeine. This is Worst Freak Accidents, part 22, the case of Thomas Anthony Mansfield. Thomas was 29 years old. He was from Wales, where he had a wife, Savannah, and they shared 2 kids. On the morning of January 5th, 2022, Thomas would receive a 100-gram bag of caffeine powder, which he had ordered from Blackburn Distributions, a UK-based supplement company. The recommended dosage of this was 60 to 300 milligrams a day. Thomas was mixing this in his pre-workout and was aiming for a mid-range serving. The scale he was using could only measure 2,000 milligrams to 5,000 milligrams, causing him to miscalculate and ingest the caffeine equivalent of 200 cups of coffee. Moments later, he would complain that his heart was beating too fast and would soon start to foam at the mouth. Paramedics would rush to save him, but ultimately could not. Toxicology would find 392 milligrams of caffeine per liter of blood. After forgetting her flip-flops, a woman would jump back in the water just to be ravaged by a boat's propeller. This is Worst Freak Accidents, part 21. That woman would be 26-year-old Natalia Fajardo, who lived in California. On November 27th of 2022, she would be visiting Whitewater Beach on San Andres Island in Colombia. In the late afternoon, Natalia would hop onto a boat with some of her acquaintances. There were around 25 people total on this boat. Shortly after hopping on, she would notice that she left her flip-flops behind. So really, without too much thinking, she jumps right back in the water, and this boat propeller sucks her right in, and she sustains serious injuries to her lower back and legs. People are able to help her onto a jet ski and rush her to the hospital at around 5:30. Despite multiple surgeries and blood transfusions, she would suffer a fatal heart attack and succumb to her injuries at around 2:30 a.m. It's all still under investigation, but police urged people to stay away from moving boats. Worst Freak Accidents, part 23. This is the case of Charmaine Maxwell. Charmaine was born on January 11th of 1969, and she would come to prominence as a member of the 90s trio Brownstone. By 46, she would have an 11-year-old son and be married to music producer Soul Shock. On February 28th of 2015, she was home alone when she would fall backwards at the doorway between her house and the patio whilst holding a wine glass. During the fall, she would drop the wine glass and it would shatter just before she fell on top of these glass shards. These pieces of glass would puncture multiple places on the back of her neck. It's rumored she was knocked unconscious during the fall, but her husband would soon arrive and call 911 after finding her, but it would be too late as she had lost too much blood. Afterwards, the police would go on to say there had been no history of domestic abuse or signs of foul play. Worst Freak Accidents, part 24. This is the case of the woman who was trapped in a cryotherapy machine. That woman was 24-year-old Chelsea Ake, who worked at Rejuvenice, a place that provided cryotherapy services. Cryotherapy machines use liquid nitrogen to reach temperatures as low as negative 240 degrees. Most places I've looked show this lasting for about 2 to 4 minutes, and it's supposed to have great health benefits. On October 19th of 2015, Chelsea would finish up her closing shift, and yeah, she would lock up shop and instead of leaving, she would decide to hop in one of the machines herself. The next morning, her frozen, lifeless body would be found in a fetal position in the machine with her phone nearby. The COD would be asphyxiation. It said she did not level the setting at the proper height and did not get enough oxygen. While the attorney representing her family had claimed that she had texted her concerns in the past about a possible nitrogen leak. The company itself would shut down. I couldn't find any further update. Worst freak accidents, part 25. This is the case of James Hackener. James Hackener was a 29-year-old man with 2 daughters, aged 3 and 4. He was also an Iraq war vet who lost both legs due to an IED attack. In July of 2011, he was visiting the Darien Lake theme park with his sister's daughter and other members of the family. While there, James, as well as his nephew, would decide to ride the ride of steel. The ride operators would disregard the rules that both legs are needed to ride this ride. James was not wearing any prosthetics that day. Both legs are needed on this ride because the safety device that holds you in kind of fits over and restrains your legs, shins, and lap. So after being allowed on the ride, he would be in the front row and would be traveling at around 50 miles per hour when he would be ejected, fall around 150 feet, and pass. His sister did say that while he was on this ride, he probably felt the most happy and most normal he had felt in 3.5 years. Worst freak accidents, part 26. This is a story of the woman who was hit by a flying umbrella at the beach. She was 55-year-old Lottie Belk from Chesterfield, Virginia. Lottie had 2 stepdaughters, a stepson, a stepdaughter, and a husband. Lottie had recently earned her master's degree in business and was at Virginia Beach celebrating with her family, her birthday, and her anniversary. On that day in June of 2016, it was fairly windy with winds gusting at around 20 to 25 miles per hour. Sometime around 5 that afternoon, the winds sent an anchored umbrella flying in the wind. This umbrella would soon hit Lottie, penetrating her chest and knocking her over on her side. She'd receive beachside aid before being rushed to the hospital where she would unfortunately pass.